So you have been writing for over 60 years?
Well, I started writing in 1948. I was a philosophy major. Not a good preparation, but it was an excellent thing to get away from, to move from the abstract to the particular. And when I began to write, as I remember, I felt confident in knowing what a poem is of mine that I thought good or bad, but I didn't have confidence in other people's poetry yet. I didn't feel that I had learned that type of appreciation. And then I read Rilke, who was so different, and yet I felt close to him. And it did instruct me on the multiplicity of possibilities. Boy, English takes so much from Latin there. Polysyllabic English. Thank God we have a little German in English, despite their barbaric warfare.
Is your understanding of your concept of poetry today similar to your understanding when you started writing poetry, or is it very different?
I think essentially I started to write poetry because philosophy let me down. I discovered it was like mathematics. It just depended on the premises, which were quite arbitrary. In poetry, you have a way of knowledge through the particular, and that knowledge will never be attained, but at least you can spend your life in the process. And I don't think I've changed a bit from that.
Some of your biographers say that you are addicted to foreign languages.
Well, I think it's better than heroin. But yes, I often don't know in what language I'm showering or dreaming in. And it's frequently in several.
Did you grow up with more than one language?
At the age of 15, when my father met my Mexican stepmother, I was 15. She was 2 years older. She was my first date. We were necking in the back of his 1942 Buick going around Mexico City at night. And 3 months later, they were married. Neither of them with a word of the other's language.
So you were exposed to Spanish at a
yes,
very...
in 3 weeks I was speaking Spanish.
You have translated many major Spanish poets. Neruda...
well, not much Neruda.
Salinas, Pedro Salinas.
Salinas, Alexandre.
Antonio Machado.
Antonio. The complete poems of Fray Luis de Leon. And the complete of San Juan.
San Juan.
And, you know, I've done all the complete sonnets of Lorca, and the complete sonnets of Machado and Borges, not the complete, but at least 36 of them, and so forth. Sor Juana, the complete poetry of Sor Juana.
You also have translated from Greek and Chinese.
Well, the Chinese I have studied more than any other language. It's the hardest.
Could we talk a little bit about St. John of the Cross, a mystic poet from Spain, 16th century? How did you encounter St. John, and why did you decide to translate a mystic poet?
I taught a course comparing 17th century metaphysical poetry from England and mystical poetry from Spain. The people like St. John profoundly influenced John Donne and the others. Some of them did translations of the Spaniards.
What was the most difficult thing about translating St. John of the Cross?
Nothing. It was invisible. St. John actually wrote it in English. That's what, I mean, I don't shower enough self-compliments on myself, but when I gave a copy of my St. John of the Cross to Vicente Alexandre, he said, I enjoyed it a little more in English. It was so fresh to my uncultivated ear. The Spaniards love paradoxes, don't they?
I think so. I think so. And St. John is a very paradoxical poet.
I go up so I can go down. I go down so I go up.
You also have books about translation. I think one from '93 is called the Poetics of Translation, and then has evolved into this
Yes.
new version,
ABC of Translation.
ABC of Translation, with your own illustrations.
Yes.
Could you read one of the poems from this book? It's the
Sure.
one that connects St. John
Okay.
and your Poetics of Translation.
What this poem will talk about is what Borges always talks about, what the mystics always talk about, what the Buddhists always talk about. They all are in some ways imitating Basilides and other of the ancient Greek Gnostics. And if you read Basilides, he has 7 sermons, and they say, from nothing comes everything, and from everything comes nothing, etc. And then every metaphor to prove it. The translator plays with nothingness. De nada a todo, from nothing to all. St. John of the Cross inserts de nada a todo into a concrete poem drawing nada, 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 todo. In nada, the Spanish poet saint finds his all. In his erotic Cantico Espiritual, the lovers in a black night of the soul go with only sun in the heart guiding them to the sonorous silence of ineffable love. In John's untranslatable verse dwells a fertile meadow of translation and the best wild herbs on the horizon. De nada a todo. De nada a todo.
Beautiful. You also have written in other languages.
Yes.
You have a book in French.
French. Yes, it's the only other language I have a book in.
Is it helpful for something in you to write in other language? Do you find
Of course, I discover other selves, other possibilities. I discover another personality.
I want to talk a little bit about a book you published here in Los Angeles with Renheim Press. Stickball on 80th Street is written in the voice of a boy that is...
Well, from a very young boy to finally an 18-year-old.
In the 30s in New York.
It begins in the 30s, right? How I wrote it is very interesting. A few of us from the North, Richard Howard and myself, went down to Austin at the invitation of the Comparative Literature Department of the University of Texas. And after this great summer, a friend of mine, Rainer Schulte, who was from Germany, and I were having supper. And I said, Rainer, what are you going to do now? He said, well, I'll do what I haven't been able to do all summer. I'll play the piano. And I said, he asked me, what would I do? And I said, well, maybe I'll try to think or write something about my childhood, which seems to me to be a total blank. And I went back to the house, and suddenly, 34 pictures came to my mind. They were titles, and I wrote them down. And after I'd written down the 34 titles, because each one was a short story, I thought, well, I might as well fill them in. My daughter was there. She didn't let me take any phone calls. I slept at most 2 hours a night. I hardly ate. I was neither hungry or tired when it was done. And at the end of 13 days, the book was finished, and I've hardly changed a word. And I had almost no changes at the time. And that was a gift. The building. Babe Ruth lives on the other side of the court. His brother-in-law jumped from the 18th story into the handball area where we play until tenants get angry. I heard the thump when I was in bed. The babe gave me a baseball diploma. The same elevator man, Joe, who slapped me for not being nice to Jerry, wasn't true, took me to the babes for the photo that came out in the mirror. Sunday afternoons we hear Father Coughlin and Hitler live, shrieking on the radio. Everyone hates Hitler. When there's a strike, new men keep billy clubs by the door. I like the scabs as much as Rudy and Joe outside, to whom we bring sandwiches. I heard Rudy got hit trying to bust in. They almost broke his head. It's funny for men to ride me up and the elevator. I always run downstairs. They slow me down as I race for the outside into the North Pole wind and the gully. But often I spend the afternoon in a corner of the elevator, going up and down in the tired coffin. When no one else is riding, they let me close the brass gate. I do it like a grown-up stiff.
You have many versions, I believe, of this the new translation of the Bible.
Yeah.
One, I don't know if it's the most comprehensive, is the Restored New Testament.
That's the final one.
That's the final one.
The main difference is simply the first one, which was called the New Covenant, which is actually what it means in the Greek, covenant. And what it means in Hebrew is what St. Paul calls to what we would call the New Testament. It hadn't been written yet because the Gospels hadn't been invented till after his death. But he still talked about what would be the scripts for it. He said he called it the new circumcision, gine paratomi in Greek, because the word for circumcision, which is bris or Brit in Hebrew, bris or Brit, depending on Ashkenazi or Sephardic, is that particular metaphor for a pledge or a contract became the abstract word for covenant or contract. And then in English, we use the Latin mistranslation, which is testament. It was not a testament. Testament implies something you write afterwards or a testimony. It was a contract, the new contract. And the Greek, or the Hebrew rather, means the new circumcision, which I think would be a strange way of putting things, but it certainly gets down to brass tacks, if we can use a terrible, painful metaphor.
How, when did you start this?
20 years before I published it. Okay. And that was 20 years of working on it. A great deal of time. Yeah, it's a big job, 1,500 pages. They expected a manuscript of about 300 pages, according to 200 or 300 pages, the contract said. I turned in 4,000. Norton didn't give a damn. They put it out in 3 fonts, Greek, Hebrew, and Hebrew and Aramaic are the same font, and English.
Could you talk a little bit about the Gnostic Gospels?
The Gnostics were my heroes. They were the people who believed that Eve was good, not evil, because Eve had the courage for knowledge. Therefore, she was a rebel. She had to be punished by death. She finds Adam, a kind of a form of clay lying on the ground, and who is not alive, and she breathes pneuma, Greek for breath, spirit, into his mouth. He rises and says, "Thank you, Eve, mother of us all, for creating me." Then in the afternoon, he snoozes and dreams that someone took a rib out of his side to make Eve, which accounts for the false statement in the Hebrew Bible. So it's a very complete turnaround, a paradox of almost everything. I mean, the Hebrew Bible begins with God in the plural. The gods created the world. There's no way of explaining it away by a majestic we. It's simply that they hadn't quite put all the gods down. One of the gods they considered was the devil. That they didn't use that word. It was El, or a lot of other words, which means also God. Everything is paradoxical in life. got to remember that. You're guilty and innocent as well.
What is still left unwritten for you?
Unwritten?
Yes.
Everything.
Everything. Are you working on specific projects now?
Oh.
If you want to talk about it.
Oh, I don't mind. I did a book called The Poetics of Ecstasy, and I have that came out in 1982, if I remember correctly, and I have been adding chapters to it. It'll be a huge book. It was about 300. I've doubled it, and I'm very happy to. I don't quite have the time. It's all done. I have to just reread and do minimal polish.
I read in an interview that you were also trying to put together all your essays, is that right?
Well, that would be in the Poetics of Ecstasy.
Yeah, but that's part of
I just finished one on Jack Kerouac and Dante. Sur le chemin, which was the first version of On the Road, which he wrote in Joual, Québécois. And nel mezzo del cammino di nostra vita mi ritrovai. On the first halfway down the road, I found myself in a very dense, frightening wood, the way the cantos begin.
Would you like to close the interview with a poem that you want to read?
I'd like to read something in French, okay?
Wonderful.
Okay.
Magnifique.
Magnifique. This is the title poem of this book. Here we are. I sleep. It's called Dawn Cafe in Paris. I sleep and already live tomorrow. Must be Monday. No, a beautiful negligent Sunday morning, and I dance with God, a beautiful woman who tells me mouth to mouth in my soul the banal secrets of my confusion and why I can't sleep, why, forced to, I get up from sleep to speak to you in the black, in hours before the cafe of dawn, who saves me, surely. I'm wrong. I kiss the mouth of God. She is soft and doesn't blame me that I die without hope. She assures me that her presence isn't necessary, and I love her, devastated by her remoteness. I'm cold. Remorseless winter lies on my knees. I kiss a phantom, warm. She is smiling. Café de l'Aube à Paris. Je dors et déjà vis demain. Lundi sera, mais non, c'est un beau dimanche matin négligent. Et je danse avec Dieu, une belle femme qui me dit bouche à bouche dans mon âme les secrets banals de ma confusion. Et pourquoi je ne peux pas dormir? Pourquoi, obligé, je me lève du sommeil pour te parler dans le noir des heures avant le café de l'aube qui me sauve sans doute? Je me trompe, j'embrasse la bouche de Dieu. Elle est douce et ne me méprise que je meurs sans espoir. Elle m'assure que sa présence n'est pas nécessaire et je l'aime dévastée par son dur éloignement. J'ai froid, l'hiver sans remords gît sur mes genoux. J'embrasse un fantôme, chaude elle sourit. C'est fini.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. Gracias.
De nada.
De nada.